Hello, merhaba, and welcome to One Day in the Life in Turkey. And thank you all for joining us. We're really excited to be hearing from students on the NSLI-Y, the National Security Language Initiative for Youth program in Izmir, Turkey, and we're lucky to be joined by alumni in the US and to be connecting all of you today. During today's event, our NSLI students and alumni speakers will present on topics in relation to the theme of One Day in the Life in Turkey. These will include what it's like to live with a Turkish host family, what it's like to learn Turkish while in a full family immersion environment. We'll hear about what extracurriculars that NSLI students engage in, and also about their unique perspectives on Turkey and the Turkish language. These topics were chosen to give students, educators, and others in the U.S. an inside view into the unique experiences of NSLI students in Turkey through their multimedia. And this will include videos and photos and their slides. And hopefully they'll share valuable insights into the language and the culture, and we hope you enjoy. Now my colleague Nicole will give you an overview of the event.
Hi everyone, merhaba. Nice to see you all here. We'd like to start off with a brief overview of what will be happening during this virtual event. The NSLI students and alumni will each take turns presenting on their topics, and during their presentations, the chat box on the bottom right corner of your screen will be open for any comments or questions you may have. And we certainly encourage lots of dialogue, including in Turkish. We'll monitor the questions, so if students are not able to answer them during their presentations, they can come back to them during the Q&A at the end. And the Q&A at the end will be a time devoted to your questions for the students and the alumni. So I will hand it back over to Will.
So before we start, we have a little icebreaker. We'd like to see where you're all joining us from. So in a second, you will see a map appear on the screen. And if you could go to the top left corner of the screen, there's a purple pin, and all you have to do is drag that to the place on the map where you're joining from. All right, I see a couple pins in the U.S., all over the U.S. All right, and we still have a couple people joining. That looks great. And you can see the Turkey site on the map there. And you can also type your location in the chat box if you like. Also, we'll do a little poll right now just to see what your affiliation with the NSLI program is. If you're a teacher, if you're an educator, or if you're just interested in the program. And it'll be a multiple choice poll, and you can just click on the box that best describes your affiliation with the NSLI program. Okay, so we have a lot of students joining, a lot of family members and friends. And now, without much further delay, we will introduce the NSLI students and the alumni who are presenting today. Our 5 students pictured on this slide from left to right are Lars, Gianna, Gracie, Mary Eleanor, Kyle, Krista, and Hank. And we will start with Krista. So, Krista.
Hi everyone. Hopefully you can hear me and see me. Okay, Will says hi. That's a good sign. I'm going to be talking to you about living in a host family while on the NSLI-Y program. So just a little bit background about me. So I actually did NSLI summer in Ankara in 2014, and I loved it so much that now I'm back for a year in Izmir. So this picture here is all of us upon arrival in the Izmir airport, meeting our host families for the first time. And as you all know, a component of the Turkish language immersion program here in Izmir is living with a host family, and same with the summer programs in Ankara and Bursa. So here we all are meeting our host families for the first time. We will be living with them for the entirety of this year. Here's a slide on food and some expectations. I don't know if any of you have actually heard Turkish spoken before, but I have an exciting quote for you here. It goes like this: Misafir umduğünü değil, güldüğünü yer. And this essentially is the Turkish proverb that host families will say to us and it means the guest will essentially eat what they're given and not always what they expect. And although this doesn't really, I don't know if this applies like that much with like Turkish food, because like if you have high expectations, you really will not be disappointed here in Turkey. The food here is absolutely spectacular. Everyone will agree. But I thought this was a good quote for host family life in general, because you will get your host family and they are your host family, and you will learn to make the best of them. They will be different from you, both culturally, linguistically. They may have very different personalities from you, but that is okay. You will get used to it. You guys will get along after you get to know each other better. My advice, if you do end up living with a Turkish host family or just a host family in general, is to really put yourself out there so that you can get to know each other better. Engage with them. Don't just stay in your room. Like, speak with them if you can. Yes, if you'd like to ask questions in the chat box, that's definitely fine. I can hopefully answer. But I guess I'll continue as you guys are asking questions. So here are some pictures of us eating delicious Turkish food with our host families. Just some general information on living with your host family. You will see them after school every day. So I usually see my host family like in the evening. We eat dinner together, and then we watch a lot of TV. Turkish host families really love their TV time. They like to relax in the evening, drink some chai, which is tea, and we have some nice conversation after dinner. Unfortunately, my little box here decided to shrink itself, but I can just read this to you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about overcoming cultural barriers. Culture shock, as I defined it, is a few like feelings of disorientation and distress, which may result from a pretty big change in environment. You are going to have culture shock if you come and live in Turkey for a year. We all have experienced culture shock, whether that be excessive amounts of sleeping from constantly tiring out our brains from speaking in Turkish all the time, and dealing with like making new friends in high school, or whether that be me the other day when I was trying to open a jar of milk and it took me 10 minutes because the milk jar was different. Or maybe you're having a hard time with wearing your house slippers because you have really big feet. That's another problem that I have. Or you're forgetting to put on your house slippers because it's traditional here in Turkey that when you're inside you wear special shoes. I have some pictures for you here. It's more of us with our host families hanging out, drinking coffee, drinking tea, very important here. And I actually have a picture of my host family from Ankara. Like I said, I stay with the host family in Ankara, and my host family in Izmir. They actually met and got along really great. We had a pancake party. It was a good time. And then last thing I'm going to tell you is that when you are living here in Turkey, if you are really any kind of exchange student, you are a youth ambassador or citizen ambassador, and not only is it your duty to like learn the culture of where you're staying, pick up some of the language, and bring that back to the United States, but also you can share your culture in the country that you are staying in. So a great way to do this is to bring your host family some gifts because they are volunteering. We all brought our host families gifts upon arrival in Izmir, and then also just in general to be very respectful to the people that you meet. You have to be very considerate because there are major cultural differences, and it's always best to play it safe when making new friends, and be considerate and respectful always. I guess, what did you all bring for your host families? Well, I brought pancake batter. We're all making pancakes here. I brought some things that have to do with Michigan, like a Michigan oven mitt. I don't know if you guys know, like we like to point to like our hand and be like I live here in Ann Arbor. So I brought an oven mitt, like represent Michigan, and then I also brought like my sister like some bows, like with like the American flag on them and stuff. So like I think local gifts, like food, and national gifts are very important to bring. So we can move on actually now to Gracie and Emmy. There are 5 of us students here, just so you know. And they are going to talk to you about Turkish culture and history. So I'll turn off my...
Hello.
Okay,
Hi. Okay, I'm Gracie, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Turkey and its unique situation in the world. So Turkey is a really big country. A lot of people in the U.S. don't realize it's about the size of Texas or the entire Midwest. And it's very, very diverse as you cross regions. Just this morning we were in Ankara, and tonight we're in Izmir. They're very different places, but it's really a beautiful diversity. And Turkey, really with its history and its culture, we like to call it a different kind of melting pot, because what happened with Turkey, there's just a rich Turkish culture that stems from the Greeks that came into Izmir, and then the Romans that annexed everything that they built, and the Anatolian culture, kind of like eastern and southern Turkey, and then the Ottoman Empire, and then Western influences, and then Ataturk, who came in and made broad reforms in the 1920s. And it really just melts together into a culture that I can only describe as uniquely Turkish. It is a quickly modernizing nation. So you'll have something like a free public Wi-Fi spot in a park, and then you'll walk a couple blocks and it'll be a cobblestone street and an open-air market. And so just the mixture of different cultures and of different times that we experience in Turkey in our daily lives is just really beautiful. So here's some things about Turkey's ancient beginnings. Like I mentioned, the Greeks were the first major civilization to come into Izmir besides the indigenous people. And so they built a lot of really cool stuff that we see in our day-to-day lives. There's a building called the Agora. It's more like a complex. And they're ancient Greek ruins in the center of Izmir. And we get to walk by them, things like that. Things like Roman aqueducts are just really cool to see on a day-to-day basis. There's tons of history here. And what's really cool is that it's integrated into daily life in Turkey. So just some things that we have here. The two on the left are pictures of the Agora, which is again in Izmir's center. And then the two on the right are pictures of Aygay, which is a little village just an hour outside of Izmir. You drive an hour outside the city and you're in traditional Turkish villages. And they're Greek ruins that have been preserved for thousands of years. And they're just gradually excavating them now. And it's just an extremely, extremely beautiful place. But then we have all of the history and all of the rich, rich culture juxtaposed with more modern things. And it just really makes for a rich cultural experience that you can also see in the language, to see how the language has grown with the country through the millennia. And it's really cool to experience on a day-to-day basis. So I'll hand it over to Emmy.
Hi, I'm Mary Eleanor, but you can call me Emmy or Mary. It's easier. I am from Denver, Colorado, and I did the Tajiki summer program in 2014, and that's not a year program, so I'm returning as a Turkish year student here in Izmir. And today, Gracie kind of already touched on this, but I'm going to talk about how the cultural traditions of Turkey are really part of a melting pot and how they stem from all sorts of different cultures coming together to form our uniquely Turkish culture. Religion is a large part of Turkish culture. We have Bayram, which we actually just celebrated. Bayram literally means holiday. But Bayram, this one, was celebrating the sacrifice of Ibrahim. Or not Ibrahim sacrificed his son Ishmael to God. He didn't actually, it's Allah, sorry. He didn't actually sacrifice his son, but it proves his loyalty and his faith. So for that ceremony and for that holiday, most families will sacrifice a sheep and they will divide the meat between families and meat to give to the poor. So we spent Bayram with our families, and I went to a different village in the Denizli province of Turkey, and I've experienced a very traditional Bayram. And there's Turkish coffee in this left picture of Gracie drinking Turkish coffee on Bayram with her host sister. In the middle, we have a picture of Turkish breakfast, which is a very large part of Turkish culture. Breakfast is truly the most important meal of the day. And Usually breakfast consists of domates, salatalık, that's tomatoes and cucumbers, and kahvaltı is breakfast in Turkish. And we have breads and jams to dip the bread in, as well as eggs, usually dried fruit, and it can pretty much become a very large spread. I also had the opportunity to experience a traditional Turkish wedding. It was a family wedding in traditional Ankara. So sometimes in villages, weddings can last up to a week, and the celebration literally does not stop for 1 week. Luckily, this one was 2 days, and I experienced their nikah ceremony. We weren't allowed to be in the room, but the bride and the groom were with an imam signing papers in another room, and we socialized with the bride's family because my host family was on the groom's side. Now I'm going to move on to the modern touches, and I'm also going to talk about a day in the life of a NSLI-Y student. So Izmir is a rather modern city. It's the third biggest city in Turkey, and it borders the Aegean Sea, and it's a port city. So we have a lot of large ships coming in and out every single day. In this left-hand picture, there's a manzara, or view, and this is from the top of an asansör, or elevator, actually in Krista, Lars's, in my neighborhood. Then below that, we have Izmir's street art, again in our neighborhood, Mithat Pasha. And that's a hilly neighborhood, so we have a lot of stairs, and young Turks are expressing themselves more and more through graffiti and art. In this right-hand side, you'll see this pathway along the waterfront. The waterfront is one of the best places, I think, to be in Izmir. It has lots of cafes and shops and a beautiful view of the sea. And below that is the cordon, which is kind of the local hot spot to hang out. Teens and adults will come together pretty much every evening and sit on the grass. There's free Wi-Fi there, which is great for us NSLI students, and that's kind of the spot. As far as a day in the life, we wake up and we all go to a Turkish high school. We started Turkish high school about 3 weeks ago, and we're all in different classes. My class focuses on Turkish literature and mathematics. Literature in Turkish is edebiyat. So every day we're studying, and it's a little bit different from high school in America because the teachers actually come to us and we stay in one class. We're all in 11th grade here because the 12th graders are studying for a large entrance exam and actually aren't in school a lot of the time. After school, we leave a little bit early so that we can make it to Tomer classes. I take the bus, and I know that Gianna takes the subway. And we all meet in downtown Izmir in a neighborhood called Alsancak for our Tomer classes. And we study Turkish from 3 to 5 every day. And then afterwards, we might spend some time in Alsancak on the cordon, and we return home for host family dinner. And then we start the day all over again the next day.
Hello.
Hello there. I'm Lars, and
I'm Gianna.
and we are going to be talking to you today about Turkish language learning.
All right, so a little bit of background about myself. I participated in the NSLI summer this past summer. So I'm at relatively an intermediate Turkish level right now.
I have had no prior Turkish language experience, but I am learning and practicing and very much enjoying Turkish.
All right, so let's jump in. So as you can see, the first bullet point on this slide is that the NSLI Turkish experience is an immersion in every sense of the word. And I truly mean that, whether it be talking to your local fig seller on your way to school or navigating a lost and found cell phone incident, every part of your life here is going to be an opportunity to utilize the language. And that's what's so beautiful about being in country learning a language, is that you are presented with an opportunity to practice at every corner.
Mm-hmm. Virtually every situation you can find yourself in is an opportunity to use your Turkish, practice speaking with somebody, and just use it as a language learning opportunity, which is vastly important in helping you greatly improve your language skills.
So there's 3 main ways that we're going to talk about, ways through which we enhance our Turkish skills, and these are our Tomer language school, our host family experience, and our high school experience. So we'll start with Ankara Tomer.
So every day for 2 hours in the afternoon, we take Turkish language classes at Ankara Üniversitesi Tomer, which is a language school here in Izmir. And we have divided the 5 of us into 2 groups. Krista and Gianna are in a more advanced group, having done the summer program last summer, and the 3 of us, me, Gracie, and Emmy, are in a less advanced group, but we're catching up, hopefully.
Yes, they definitely are. So we go to Tomer from 3 to 5 each day, and this is a component of the NSLI program that is unique to this program, and it's really the program's central academic component. Since NSLI's stated objective is to have Americans learn critical foreign languages, this grammar-heavy school is really critical in order for us to attain the fluency that we in the State Department hopes we will have attained by the end of June.
That's right. And we all, I think I speak for everybody, we all love our Tomer classes. The teachers are friendly, they're caring, professional, but also really fun. And we all really look forward to this and greatly enjoy our classes at Tomer.
Yes. So another extremely important part of your NSLI experience, if you choose to participate in NSLI Turkish Year, is Turkish High School. So you will attend Turkish High School every day in the mornings to the early afternoons, and this is an extremely important part of your cultural immersion experience. This is where you get to make friends and you get to utilize everything that you learn at Tomer and at home.
And you also get to just practice speaking conversational Turkish with Turkish peers. And it's great to actually establish some relationships with Turkish peers here in Turkey and also have an opportunity to practice hearing a lot of Turkish and also speaking some Turkish with new friends.
Definitely. So high school, in my opinion, provides the opportunity to truly become a Turk. At this point in my high school experience, every one of my teachers and friends actually have been surprised to learn that I'm not Turkish, which is a good sign in my opinion. But really making friends, learning the slang, the social trends that are going on right now in Turkish culture, it's really critical for you to fully integrate yourself into this country and into life here.
Okay, the final way in which we really have an opportunity to practice our Turkish is at home. So as you know, we're all staying with host families, and these host families, like with in every other respect, these host families vary widely in their language, in their English language ability. So, for example, Gianna and my host families speak virtually no English, and so we have had to speak Turkish from the start, which is certainly a challenge.
Yes.
But it also helps us to practice more Turkish.
And let me say something. So me coming in with a NSLI summer under my belt, it was definitely an easier transition. But for Lars, Gracie, and Emmy coming into Turkey with no Turkish and sometimes having families that didn't speak English, let me reassure you that this is a good thing. This is an extremely good thing because the less English they know, the faster you're going to learn. So do not be intimidated by this. It's an interesting experience at first, but you will very, very surely and quickly accustom to it.
It can be frustrating at times, but I can tell you I am happy to have a family that does not speak much English because I'm forced to just speak Turkish all the time, and that's going to pay off, I hope.
Yes.
Other families speak much more English, and that just is luck of the draw, and that's how it happens.
Yes.
A main part of Turkish host family life is eating food together and watching Turkish TV. Turks are really into their Turkish soap operas and various TV shows.
Right. So, and another really big part of Turkish culture that you will learn once you get here is the otururuz culture. So that's a Turkish word, and it means we sit. And basically that's the word that encompasses the Turkish national activity of sitting at home with your family, drinking kahve, Turkish coffee, watching soap operas, reading newspapers, chilling at home. It's a very relaxed life, and it's great for us crazy Americans to kind of experience a different culture's way of approaching stress and life in general.
And these meals and these sort of sitting and watching TV is a great opportunity to chat with your family, speak some Turkish, talk about your day, hear some Turkish from the TV, and just sort of be immersed in Turkish.
So really the last point that we'll make in this Turkish language learning component of the presentation is that utilizing your Turkish at home, at school, and of course at language school is integral for you to really fully engage with the language, the culture, and the people, and for you to attain the level of fluency that most NSLI students do at the end of the program. So if you completely commit yourself to learning Turkish and acknowledge that this is an experience that will have its challenges, but the upsides will far outweigh them, then you're going to have a great time and you will gain so much Turkish language knowledge you won't believe it. All right, so
I think that wraps up our session on Hank and Kyle, who are going to talk about transportation and some other stuff.
All right, yes, let's see them.
Okay, hey everyone, I'm Kyle, a Turkish summer alum from Dallas, Texas. Hank and I are going to take you through some things that we encountered during a typical day in Ankara this past summer. This will include transportation, cultural activities, food, and finally safety. I'll begin by talking about a typical day in the summer program. Then I'll pass it on to Hank, who will talk about food, transportation, and safety. Every single participant has a completely different and unique experience, so I could not tell you any one specific answer to all Turkish culture. Each host family has a completely different background and lifestyle, so each participant could have a completely different experience during their time abroad in Ankara or in another place. Hank and I lived in the exact same apartment building in Ankara, but had very different experiences with respect to host family roles, norms, values, and the way that our days were structured within our host families. A typical weekday in Ankara followed this pattern. I'll move on to the next slide. On this slide, you can see just some of the sites in Ankara that we got to spend time exploring: the mall, the language school, and some of the different bazaars. And on the bottom left is a street in Kızılay, which is where the school was. So here's the structure of a typical day. We would wake up. I lived in the furthest out neighborhood, so I had to wake up pretty early to make my hour and 20-minute-ish commute. So I would wake up, and every morning, without fail, my host mom cooked me a hot breakfast. And this was just such a sweet gesture, something that she did not have to do. She would wake up specifically for that reason. I'd always have a hot egg dish that would have some type of meat and bread cooked inside of it, and then there would be cheese, which we call pinj. Then there would be olives, fruit, tomatoes. So there was a mixture of vegetables, cheese, and bread, and piles of bread. Following breakfast, we would walk to the metro station, which was about a 30-minute walk. Until halfway through the summer, we found out you could take a bus. So then you'd travel via the metro to Kızılay, which is about 30 minutes from the neighborhood I lived. We would travel to Tomer, which is about 4 blocks from the metro. So on the subway, it was a good experience to study, practice Turkish with Hank, who I commuted with often, and just relax before the morning. So then, we got to Tomer, we would have about 3 hours of class in the morning, and that would include grammar, mechanics, speaking, and listening. And after about an hour of each class, we would have a 10-20-minute teneffüs, which is a break between classes, and it would give you a chance to go up to the cafe on the 8th floor and buy a snack. And I also got to talk to some exchange students from South Korea and other places in Europe. And so that was an interesting experience, just to see where everyone was from and getting to speak with them. In Turkish, of course. After about the 3 hours of language class, we would have lunch, which was an hour free in Kızılay, and the stipend covered most of this expense, so you could go to any of the cafes and restaurants, and there was a good amount in the neighborhood near the school. And we would return to class for an hour or two. Following this, we would have a cultural excursion as a group. I'll come back to this in just a minute. And then after class, after the cultural excursion, it would be sometime in the early evening, and we might have time to do something with our American friends or Turkish siblings, depending on what they were doing in your situation. Some of the things I got to do after the class and excursion was go to Turkish movies, visit different bazaars and markets, and some of the modern luxury malls. We explored historic neighborhoods, hung out in cafes, and one of the things we did a couple times, we rode a gondola sky tram type of thing. It was called the Teleferik. It was free and had amazing views of the hills around Ankara, so that was just a cool thing to do. And another interesting thing I got to do with some of my friends after the excursion was we visited the largest mosque in Turkey, which is in Ankara, and actually not Istanbul, as people might think. This was Kocatepe Masjid. In the evening, we returned back to our host family via metro or bus for dinner, and mine consisted of chicken, pilaw, and then we would have family time, and you could watch TV or play games with your family, and then you'd go to bed. Some of the different excursions we got to do after class, I'll start in the top left. We had Turkish folk dancing lessons before the final presentation for our host family, and I was not very good, but it was just a really cool just to see what traditional Turkish dancing was like, and actually someone took a video from our group, and we made the worldwide Ankara Snapchat story with our awkward dancing for Turkish folk dancing, but it was a fun experience. Another thing we got to do was visit Anıtkabir, which is Atatürk's mausoleum at the center of Ankara. We did hat, which is a type of art that's similar to calligraphy, with the same kind of pencil strokes, and we went to a studio that had been around for hundreds of years to do this. And then we also did a thing called Ebru, and that's Hank in that picture, which is papal marbling, where dye was splashed into water in oil, and you would place paper on it, it would make an imprint. So it was just cool seeing these traditional types of crafts. Now I'll hand it off to Hank, and he will talk about transportation, food, and safety.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Hank, and I completed the NSLI-Y summer program in Ankara last summer along with Kyle. I'm currently studying linguistics at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I will be presenting on transportation and food in Turkey, and on the end I'll talk a little bit about safety as well. So in the top left corner of the slide, you'll see what I had for breakfast on a typical day and my exchange. And this is in contrast to what you normally see for Turkish breakfast. The typical image of a Turkish breakfast, as the alumni mentioned before, there are these large displays of food on long tables, and the whole family sits down together to enjoy this kind of bountiful meal together. But this is just another example of the kind of inescapable complexity of cultures. Every person's experience is going to be different. As Kyle mentioned, we lived in the same apartment building, but it was really interesting to compare our host family and exchange experiences as we went to Turkish class together almost every day. So the pictures on the bottom of this slide are of the metro in Ankara. It's a very fast, modern system. I rode it every day to get to Turkish class. An interesting note about public transportation: the conductors of the trains or the bus drivers would refer to the passengers as arkadaşlar, which means friends in Turkish. So there's kind of this distinct feeling of community that I don't really feel when taking the bus or the metro here in the States. Also, people are very respectful on any kind of public transport in Turkey, which is visible during Ramadan when some people fast from sunup to sundown. So during Ramadan, no one eats or drinks anything on the metro or the bus out of respect and solidarity for those who are fasting. And then on this slide, we'll talk about some of the other options for transportation in Turkey. There are public buses, of course, and work the same way that they do in the States. But then there are these things called a dolmuş, which is kind of like a shared taxi van. Dolmuşes run fixed routes, but they don't have set stops. So you have to flag them down to get on. You get on, you pay, you ride it to where you want to get off, and then you yell "müsait bir yerde," which just means at an available place whenever you want to get off. You see these vans all over the place that say okul taşıtı, which literally means school bus. But during the summer, they use school buses for private transportation for, say, a specific neighborhood or a specific company's employees. So my neighborhood was actually lucky enough to have one of these private services that would drop me off right in front of my host family's apartment building. But I only found out about that like 2/3 buildings of the way through the summer. There are also taxis, but prepare yourself because Turkish driving culture is a little bit different from the driving culture in the US. Everything is kind of more hectic. Things like lane lines aren't really as strict. And people like to drive really, really close to other cars or pedestrians or what have you. Of course, this doesn't mean that the Turkish people are bad drivers. It's just that the culture is different. And as long as everyone understands how the unwritten driving rules work, then everyone's safe. But I still said whenever people asked me what the scariest part of my exchange was that it was taking a taxi. So now on to a lot of people's favorite part, I'm sure, Turkish food. I think this is a necessary component in any presentation about Turkey. It was certainly a very large part of my experience. At the top, there's a simple version of döner, which is sold anywhere and everywhere and is always good. And this is what, according to the Turks, the Greeks stole and called a gyro. So below that is mantı, Turkish pasta, then stuffed grape leaves, and then to the right you see sunflower seeds, which are extremely popular, especially in the youth of Turkey. They're kind of a social food. I remember sitting around a table with my host brother and his friends with just a bag of sunflower seeds in the middle that we would all take from, and we'd just hang out for about an hour, and now I'm very proud of my newly acquired sunflower cracking skills. On the bottom, you'll see two very popular meat dishes in Turkey, Iskender kebab, which is sliced lamb, and then köfte, which is kind of like Turkish meatballs. So then, of course, there's Turkish coffee and Turkish tea or chai. Every time of the day is time for tea in Turkey. And then in the middle, there's this drink called ayran, which is this kind of salty yogurt drink, and Turks love it. It was kind of divisive in our group. You either loved it or you hated it, so you just have to try it for yourself. And for dessert, of course, there's Turkish delight, this thing called helva on the bottom, and of course baklava, which is just beyond comparison to any baklava you've ever had in your life before. And to finish off my part, I'd like safety during exchange. All of us had, as NSLI students, had access to many different resources in the event of any security concern. At the bottom, you can see a short list of just some of the most basic ones. There were AFS staff and volunteers always ready and extremely willing to help us with whatever we needed on both sides in the US and in Turkey, as well as the team from NSLI. We were registered with the American Embassy, and at the top right you'll see an email that the American Embassy sent out to all US citizens in Turkey at the time. This was right after Turkey had had a major election, and the embassy just reminded everyone to stay alert and not incite protests and things like that. Your host family is also so best security resources available. They will know their neighborhood very well. They will know where you should and shouldn't go at what time and who you should or shouldn't hang out with, as well as just being another in a long list of people on standby to answer any questions that you might have as a NSLI student. Another person on that list was our local coordinator from AFS Turkey, who was our point person for the whole summer. She escorted us to our cultural activities and just generally served as a bridge to Turkish culture. We were all issued Turkish phones, which you'll see in the top left, as well as safety cards with the phone numbers of a bunch of people that I just mentioned, as well as our host family's address. And I remember using that card on one of the first days I had to walk back from the metro by myself, and I still didn't quite know where I was going, so I stopped someone and used my recently acquired Turkish skills to ask them, how do I get here, as I pointed to the address on my card. And they said something I sort of understood, but they pointed, and I was able to find my way back. Turkish people were very friendly and definitely willing to help you out if you ever need directions. I had a couple people actually walk with me a few times to show me how to get where I wanted to go. And yeah, so there are many resources available. And then at the bottom of the slide, I included that picture just to remind us all of why we do exchange in the first place. It's not to be comfortable all the time. It's not so we can have this summer or this year of sunshine and rainbows where everyone's just so happy the whole time. We're here because we want to bridge gaps between countries, between cultures, and between people. You know, we're here to work through our differences and see the world in a new way. And a lot of times that means being a little uncomfortable and putting yourself in new situations, like living with a different family or trying to explain with social justice issues in Turkish. But this is ultimately how we foster more understanding, both personally and as a world. So before we get into the Q&A, there's a video that I'd like to show. Throughout each day I spent in Turkey, I recorded very short video snippets of things that were interesting to me, and then at the end of the day I picked 1 second of video from that day that was my favorite, and with an app on my phone I put all those seconds of video together to get this video.
Sorry. It's just writer and your phone against the coming. Nasılsınız? Hayırdır?
Hayata geçiriliyor.
Wow, great video, and what great presentations. A huge thank you to our speakers, our students and alumni, and we're sure that everyone who is attending is really excited to be meeting our presenters, so we will switch to the discussion mode right now. And if our NSLI students and alumni could put on their webcams, we will start the question and answer session. We'll take about 10 minutes to do that. And I think that we'll lead off with the first question. And we'd like to know here at iEarn USA, we'd like to know, what is a cultural or linguistic goal that you've been working towards, and how? So feel free to take the first question in any order that you would like.
Hi, I can start, and Gracie and I will start. My cultural or linguistic goal, we have several. One that I will talk about is in high school, I'm in a class that focuses a lot on Turkish literature. So every day in literature class, they're reading famous Turkish poems, which are an essential part of culture. So by the end of the year, I'd like to be able to fully understand that class and be able to recite Turkish poetry.
My goal right now is to go an entire day with everything in Turkish. I've started to listen to some Turkish music. I'm starting to talk with people more in Turkish, to think in Turkish a little bit. And so I will be very, very happy if I can get through an entire day without any English interactions.
One of my language goals, and I guess, I don't know if the question was asking it specifically, but it was for my career, kind of. One of the reasons that I wanted to pursue a critical language was I'm interested in having a global career, and whether it's Turkish or another NSLI country that has these critical languages, they'll be important and can use that as a global competitor. And so that was one of my main goals throughout learning Turkish, and definitely being able to, like Gracie said, or maybe it was ME, but anyways, one of the biggest goals I had was to be able to go through a whole day with Turkish, and I think that's a good goal to have.
I guess I can go next. During exchange this summer, I remember thinking to myself that after a couple weeks had gone by, that I really wanted to start having meaningful conversations with my host family or with people I met, as opposed to just the general, like, hi, where are you from? How do you like Turkey? What's your favorite animal, or whatever people talk about when you meet them. But I made an intentional effort to have meaningful interactions with people and talk about, and you'd be surprised how much you can communicate even when you're just learning a language. So that was a goal I had.
I'll talk about my language learning goal. So for me, the food experience here in Turkey is not quite as integral as the language experience, but it's very important. And so one of my goals is to be able to go to a Sunday bazaar, which is where they sell all the fruits and veggies and delicious food, and conduct all of my interactions and have conversations with the people and talk about Turkish food culture in Turkish. So that's my language learning goal.
And for me, I would like to be able to read a Turkish book, like an actual Turkish book, not a children's book, not a simplified book, but like a normal Turkish book by the end of this program.
My goal is really to just feel like I am a Turkish person, like living in Turkey. Like I want to think in Turkish, I want to dream in Turkish, and I want to feel and behave like I'm Turkish, essentially. Become a Turk.
One of the biggest challenges that we're all facing right now is actually in high school. It's a tough situation jumping into a new school, meeting new people, but it's also difficult because we don't have the language abilities quite yet. And it helps that we have Tomer class every day, and each and every day we're learning more and more and interacting it more and more. But I think that for us, the biggest challenge right now is really connecting with people on like a deep level, as you would somebody back in the U.S. or a friend who speaks your native language. because it is obviously more comfortable to connect with people who speak your language. So every day we're pushing ourselves to really make new friends and to branch out and practice our language abilities in high school, because it's a completely different social environment and it's also a brand new language.
Yeah, and just how much we stick out, kind of. Turkish teens are ridiculously trendy, first of all.
Yes.
They're teaching us some things. But just little things like that, things about your appearance, how you dress with your American clothes that you brought, things like that, you stick out a lot. And so you're trying to adapt to the minor cultural things that you gradually start to perceive. And then you're also trying to connect with people. And again, with the language barrier, so we have great, deep conversations with our fluent English with each other. And then you go to high school, and the conversation is brought down by your own language barrier. And so that's very, very motivating to keep studying the language. But it teaches you how to connect to people in a whole new way when your usual mode of connection is no longer available to you. And so it's very different, but I think we're all growing in a lot of ways from it.
So to answer the question of what is difficult about being a citizen ambassador of the United States, in my opinion, one of the difficulties that I've experienced is really conveying the idea that American identity is very, very complex, and that Americans don't look the same, Americans don't act the same, they don't speak the same languages, their states are very different, cultures are very different, and religions are very different. And so in Turkey there is a lot of diversity, but it hasn't quite experienced the extent that the American melting pot has. So one of the challenges that I've had being a citizen ambassador is representing my culture, my background, and yet really conveying that my American experience and my American identity isn't necessarily reflective of all of America, but it's.
And I can kind of springboard off of that. From on the other side of that, a challenge that I faced as an exchange student was not simplifying Turkish culture and realizing that Turkish culture is extremely complex and multifaceted. At the beginning of exchange, I remember catching myself, I would see something like a spiral staircase on the side of a building. And if I saw that in the US, I would just say, okay, it's a spiral staircase on the side of a building. It's a decision that some architect made. But when I saw it in Turkey, it was suddenly a Turkish thing. And Turkish people must love spiral staircases. And I kind of found myself assigning meaning to things that didn't necessarily have meaning. So that is a challenge, just navigating, experiencing a new culture and realizing that it is just as complex.
And that's a big part of the path to cultural understanding. And if you become a participant, you'll definitely hear about that a lot. But it's a process. First, you hear about what's on the surface, and then you delve deeper into the meaning behind the culture.
Excellent points, everyone. Really insightful. Thank you all so much. Another question we had was, what are some of the unique opportunities you've had as NSLI scholars, or when you were in Turkey as a NSLI scholar?
Okay, can everyone hear me? For me, this was a really great experience to kind of have a better idea of what I want to do in my future, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I really enjoy living abroad, and I had never been abroad until NSLI, so this has been very eye-opening for me. And I learned about working for the State Department, and now I'm kind of interested in that. And it's kind of like practice, seeing if I want to spend my career abroad in the future, from my experience living abroad now and how this changes me. Is this something that I want to do for the rest of my life? And it's also a great experience to see the world through another lens, learn another language. I just know English. Now I'm I will become fluent in Turkish. And also for me, kind of establishing self-identity. Living abroad for a full year can really change you. You can learn more about yourself. So it's also an opportunity in that manner.
So from an alumnus perspective, coming back from NSLI Exchange, it's been really cool to be a part of this robust alumni network. I've met at my university, I've met people who have gone on NSLI exchanges summers and years and been able to talk with them and relate to them about their experiences abroad, as well as we have a resident diplomat here who I talked to some about the foreign service and opportunities, things like internships.
So I think that mine is less of like a direct opportunity that I found. It's not like a specific program or a specific connection, but one of the main reasons I chose to immerse myself in another culture and language for a full year was to gain a perspective on communication, because as a career I would like to do autism research with a focus on cognitive studies and communication, because communication is one of the biggest challenges that people with autism face. So being with NSLI has given me the opportunity to see just how difficult it is to communicate when you don't speak the same language and you don't understand things the same way that other people do. So every day I'm sitting here and I'm thinking in 2 languages, and people are saying things that I don't understand, and I'm feeling things, and I want to say things, and I want to interact with people and communicate and express myself, but there's so much more work to it than that. And just in these 2 months, I've gained a much wider perspective on how communication actually works, because we live in a very linguist-centric world, but not everyone necessarily communicates through language, and being in this environment has really helped me gain that perspective.
Well, thank you so much, Mary Eleanor, and thank you, NSLI alumni and students, and thank you to our participants for all of their great questions. Hopefully this experience inspired you to learn Turkish yourselves, as well as learn more about the Turkish culture. Before we go, Nicole's going to share a few great NSLI resources with you. We have a couple websites that you can check out and ways to connect with alumni, as well as learn more about the program if you're interested in applying as a student, or if you just want to tell other people about it as an educator.
Okay, thank you so much, Will, and thank you again to our awesome NSLI students and alumni for your excellent presentations. So I'll just change the slide here and share with you the NSLI for Youth website, where you can learn more about the program, including how to apply, as Will mentioned. And there is still a bit of time for those of you looking to apply for this coming summer and academic year. The application deadline is actually just 2 days away, October 29th, so be sure to check it out if you haven't already. And we also wanted to share with you the NSLI Interactive website, which showcases the language learning and cross-cultural experiences of NSLI students and alumni through their stories and multimedia, similar to what you just heard and saw from our speakers. We will be posting the recording of this virtual event and the students' multimedia, the NSLI Interactive site, within the next week, so be sure to check that out as well. And of course, you can find stories, photos, and videos by and about the students and alumni in all the NSLI countries, as well as authentic language learning resources there as well. So I'll hand it over back to Will.
Yeah, again, just thank you all so much for joining us today. Heartfelt thank you to the alumni and to all the students who joined us. We know that while you're on program, you have a lot going on in terms of homework and study and just being with your families. And so thank you for taking time out of your days to prepare and really give us some great insights into the program and just some inspiring perspectives on life abroad as a young person, as well as language learning. So thank you again. Thank you, Lars, Gianna, Gracie, Mary, Kyle, Krista, and Hank.